Here we go. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Contemporary Issues Sunday School class on a nice warm July day. I heard it was 101 yesterday in Denver and set a record, and today it's supposed to be 102. So are we in Phoenix or are we in Denver?
Oh, it's 115 and
115 in Phoenix, Steve said. Okay, so we'll count ourselves cool and lucky.
yeah.
All right. We are pleased today to have our classmate, Dr. Peter Van Arsdale, our cultural anthropologist, retired cultural anthropologist for the most part, but still very busy in your profession. I know. But looking forward to him telling us about one of his books called Encounters, 50 Fascinating Strangers from My Life on the Road. And so we thought this would be a good chance to hear not only about the people that he's met, but Peter's going to give us a chance to talk a little bit about what makes people memorable in our own lives and in our society. And maybe a few of you mentioned people that were unusual that you met and remembered. So we were looking forward to that. But there are a couple of announcements. First, Zoomers, nice to have you here. Please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen when you're not speaking. And we are recording this for future playback. And any other announcements? Yes, Alice.
Speaking of encounters, on September 12th at the Coven Park, which is next to Goodson Center, we are having our Contemporary Issues end of summer social. So from 4 to 8, we've got the place reserved. So last year it was at our house, but it's gotten a little bit too big in our house. So put that on your calendar. Speaking of encounters.
That's right.
Okay. I knew it was September.
September will be our fall picnic. Yeah, we've always got a good turnout for picnics, so that'll be great. Okay, any other announcements, things in the news we want to discuss? The war drags on, plenty in the news, prayers for leaders around the world, all of that. Okay. Okay, quick bio of Dr. Peter Van Arsdale, who has taught for many years at DU and other places, and as a cultural anthropologist, studied cultures around the world, been to more than 50 countries. The Denver Museum of Nature and Science called him Denver's own Indiana Jones. And he is a fellow of the Explorers Club, but he did more than cultural anthropology. He was also co-founder of the Denver Hospice and the Rocky Mountain Survivors Center and other things too. So we admire Peter's civic contributions also, of course. And in this book, he's only picked 6. He doesn't have time for 50 people to describe. So he picked some of the best 6. And a couple of those, for example, that he didn't pick that made me laugh when I read this. One was he and his wife went to, hi Kathy, I see Kathy.
Kathy's over there.
Went over to the American Furniture Warehouse one day to return a mattress. And Kathy said, well, we ought to tell the owner, Jake Jabs, that our mattress isn't working so well. And so Peter said, I don't think he's here. He's a big executive. And so they went up to find his office and found him in the mattress department just by accident that day, jumping on a mattress to test for them. And so they had a chance to tell him, and he gave them a replacement mattress for the one that didn't work. So there's funny stories as well as very interesting people in the book. So with that, please welcome Peter.
No, thank you. It's great to see all your friends. You mean a lot to me in this class, led by our good friend Steve. Means a lot to Kathy and I and many others here. So thank you, Steve, for your leadership. We'll have a lively discussion today. We'll have some fun, as Steve was suggesting. We have serious stories, funny stories, strange stories to tell about the 6 that I've chosen out of the 50. I chose a diverse range of people out of the 50 that I thought you'd be particularly interested in. But to begin, and as you saw in the announcement that Steve sent out, we want you to think of memorable people you've met, perhaps as strangers or encountered unexpectedly. Not everyone that I encounter was unexpected. Some I expected, but many were unexpected as a sideline to the work I was doing. You similarly have met interesting and occasionally strange and innovative people. Be thinking today, please, about what made some of those folks memorable for you. And we'll have a couple minutes at the end where you can share some of the folks you might like to mention that you met that were memorable to you. Interestingly, this book, even though it says 50 Fascinating Strangers, happens to, by coincidence, span about 50 years of my life. So 50-50. So I have strangers dating back to the 1970s, and I've got strangers in the 2020s, and all in between. Let me tell you that Reverend Amy, as many of you recall, gave a great sermon on July 5th. Let me remind you of that sermon. That's the one where she talked about, among other things, the value of small, everyday human interactions. You folks are, yeah, like Jane's nodding, others of you are remembering that sermon from July 5th. And she said one of the things to do, or some of the things to do, as you have important, small scale, not famous interactions, is number one, make eye contact. Yeah, you folks are nodding now. You remember that? Yeah, that was really good. Number two, ask a question and wait for the real answer. And remember, number three, engage a small act of kindness, which isn't touted by anybody. Those were three really good points from Reverend Amy. And I begin with those because they complement much of what you'll hear from me as best I could play and think about those things in my career, even though much of this is long before I met Reverend Amy. So how do the ordinary in some ways become extraordinary? Because for me, every one of the 50 encounters in my book, for me, became extraordinary. Let me just read you this one paragraph from the afterword of my book. While not a memoir or autobiography per se, the vignettes in this book nonetheless reflect my life. In a sense, it's my lived experience. I placed each encounter in its educational, cultural, political, spiritual, health, technical, sports, or environmental context. Often a context that was not immediately apparent to me at the time. Reflecting back, I learned something, often through later reflection, from every encounter.
You do that.
Something is down on the floor there. Thank you very much. So, my friends, in picking these six, part of the way, since we want to have some fun, is that people often ask me, oh, you did your doctoral work in Indonesia. Kathy did her master's work in Indonesia. Do you speak Indonesian? Well, yes, I do. And sometimes people will say, wow, that's a strange and interesting language. Could you speak a little bit of it for me? And I say, sure, I'd be glad to. So just for fun, since a couple of these come from Indonesia today, I'm going to speak to you in Indonesia. But good news, I'll translate for you into English. So the very first one, now we'll put them on the screen here.
Share with our Zoom folks too. There, okay.
There we go, this very smiling fellow that you see. And I title each chapter by the role, R-O-L-E, of the person as I perceived it in his or her society. As they interacted with me or as they were doing their thing in their cultural context. I give you this one first because I was inspired on the role name for this young man from a Reverend Mark sermon. I met this man long before I met Reverend Mark, but as I was reflecting and writing the book, I reflected back on a sermon Reverend Mark had given in 2021 on the Sherpa. And he said the Sherpa is that person who comes to guide you and help you achieve a goal. It's not always on a mountain like the Himalayas. It can be in the jungles of New Guinea. This man, for part of my doctoral work in 1974, became my Sherpa. This man's name is Joachim Yo-Yo. And he said to me, Salamat pagi. Nama saya Joachim Yo-Yo. Saya bisa menolong Anda. So what I've said so far is, good day, it's good to meet you. My name's Joachim Yo-Yo, and I want to help you. Oh, it's a surprise. Particularly a surprise because if you look carefully, if you could shift the photo just a little bit higher, Steve, just right there, stop. You'll notice that his legs are shriveled twigs. That's all I can describe. 2 shriveled twigs because of polio. And his legs were entirely up, they retracted, shall we say, up into the lower part of his body. When Joachim came to meet me, he walked on his hands.
Oh. They do that in the circus.
Like this, with his body swinging
Yeah.
between his hands. I thought, I've never met such a person. And here he's talking to me saying, Saya bisa menolong Anda. I can help you. Saya pintar sekali. I'm very smart. Saya tahu banyak orang di dalam hutan ini. I know lots of people in this jungle. Saya tahu banyak orang di dalam kampung ini. I know lots of people in this village. Wow. I said, you're hired. Well, I hired him. I paid him for his time. He was a wonderful helper, introducing me to people and helping me make contacts as I began my doctoral work in these remote villages of Western Indonesian New Guinea.
He had a big smile too.
He had a big smile and extremely, no surprise, very smart and articulate. He didn't speak English, but we did all of our work in Indonesian. Now, already have a question from one of our friends.
Yeah, he looks like he's got good teeth.
He does. There's no dental care there of any sort. Well, one of their main foods is sago palm starch. And then they have vegetables that they grow in small gardens, and much of it also hunting and gathering. With things like toothpicks. Yeah, indigenous toothpicks. So we began our project, and it went along very successfully. And then at a later time, I met another man in a neighboring village whose name was Ochanam. And Ochanam was known as the most famous storyteller of this region of Western New Guinea among these people. Their name is the Asmat, A-S-M-A-T, the Asmat people, where Kathy did her wonderful musical analysis and where I did my doctoral analysis. And Ochanam told a story. He said there was a mythical being, and that mythical being valued all people. And that mythical being valued people with handicaps. As Reverend Mark likes to say, people who are differentially abled. I love that phrase. Well, he didn't use that phrase, but Reverend Mark does. People with handicaps. And the mythical being said, you're also valuable in our society. And in fact, you can be helpful to other people, just like this guy was being helpful to me. And in fact, it turns out, Auchanam, even though he was in a different village, was in part thinking of this man who he'd met. And he said, the mythical being said, we could cause you to lose your malady. We could cause you to lose your deformity. We could cause you to have perfect legs again. But guess what? Because of the way you are, you're valuable. Stay that way and do good.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Like FDR.
Yeah.
There you have it. Pretty cool, huh? What a blessing to meet the man who I call in my book, the Sherpa. Okay, next, please.
Okay.
Peter,
Yes,
I can't help but interject. Our son, for 35 years was in a beautiful community down in Arizona.
yes, I'm aware of that.
That was gifted to Rainbow Acres from the Yavapai Apache.
Yeah,
And the reason that land was given to them almost free of charge was they saw the handicapped, the developmentally disabled in that community as being specially gifted.
yes,
So it relates in part.
absolutely,
What you were just saying, very intrigued.
absolutely.
Have certain divine powers or.
And to the value of your wonderful son, Gregory.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
exactly.
absolutely. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Absolutely, Jane.
No.
You're not kidding. Well, here you see the Rain Man. This man's name is Kim Peek. I met him in the year 2000. I was boarding an airplane flying from Denver to Salt Lake City. I'd already just gotten my seat near the front. Of course, it was an economy. I'd never sit in first class. And coming into the economy area just after me was a man holding an Academy Award, a trophy. You can see the trophy right there. And if you could flip it down a little more, you can see it even a little better. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. He was holding that Academy Award, an Oscar.
Yeah.
So all the people in the front of the plane started saying, hello. One man yelled out, are you a Hollywood star? Another man yelled out, did you win that Oscar? And then the older man who was accompanying him stood up. Again, we weren't ready to take off yet. And the older man said, I'm Fran Peek. This is Kim Peek, the real Rain Man. Whoa. Everybody gasped.
The movie with Dustin Hoffman.
Yes, correct. That's correct. It was in large part based on the real Rain Man's life, Kim Peek. So I had the pleasure of meeting Fran Peek, his father, and Kim Peek, the Rain Man. Kim was a man of very few words. His father told me that, and he gave me an autographed copy of the book on Kim's life, that the reason Kim had the disability / ability that he had as a very gifted analyst, particularly of numbers and dates, and ironically was that his corpus callosum was severely damaged. That's what links the sides of the brain here, left and right hemispheres. His was essentially non-functional, yet his brain, in many ways, was super functional. In some ways, he was a savant, as you also saw in the movie. And the movie, by the way, is not exactly a parallel of his actual life. I've tracked his actual life. The movie is a nice compliment with Dustin Hoffman. So one of the people sitting near me said, wow, I've already heard that you're a savant, Kim. Could you do this for me? I was born, what did he say? I was born on March 10th, 1952. What day of the week was it? Kim thought for 5 seconds and said Tuesday. Matt said, you are correct. I'm not just kidding. It didn't take you more than 5 seconds. Then another man asked, we were all kind of gasping at all this. It was totally amazing. Another man asked, picked up a number like 114 times 3,412. What is that? Kim thought for 10 seconds and gave the proper answer in 10 seconds flat for a complicated multiplication.
Wonder if he could count cards like in the
Well,
movie.
he actually, that was not one of his strengths, it turns out.
Okay.
So the long and the short was, on the flight to Salt Lake, I luckily had a chance to chat with his father, who was very articulate and supportive. I couldn't say much to Kim because Kim doesn't talk much. He talks, but not much. It's very straightforward, bland. And I thanked him, and just near the end, he had an extra copy of his book. He gave me the copy that Fran had written about his son. He autographed it. Fran and Kim autographed the book for me. And I said goodbye to both of them. I thanked them for their time and the information. And then as I got off the airplane and watched them just a little bit ahead of me in the entryway into the lobby in the Salt Lake Airport, I watched Kim button his son's shirt because he couldn't button his shirt. He could calculate brilliantly, and he couldn't button his shirt.
I think I missed something. Was he Indonesian?
No, Kim is from Utah.
Okay.
Isn't that something memorable?
Great story.
Yes,
You know, I find it interesting that you just happened to be on the plane at the same time
Yes.
he was.
yes,
And I think that is divine.
thank you.
I mean, I think there was a
Serendipity.
reason
Yes,
for you to be there.
thank you.
I believe.
I thought there might be two. Yes, thank you. And when you have these encounters, if you're open, they will unfold often for you. But you have to be open, and you have to be willing to meet people and speak out and be open to all types of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the world. Thanks for your comment. Well, I guess we could go to the third person.
Okay.
There she is. Look carefully at the bottom part of the picture. Steve can get scan up and scan down. She's in a wheelchair with next to my student Leslie. Leslie's on the left, and the Queen, Asia Comber, is on the right in her wheelchair. So you can see them, my student hugging her. So for the University of Denver, I had the privilege in the late 1990s and on into the early 2000s to co-lead a internship program in the country of Bosnia. Shortly after the Bosnian War ended, we began an internship program for some of our students, about 10 or 12 each summer. And I went over there to Bosnia 6 or 7 summers in a row. The very first summer, being a guy who enjoys, like many of you, outdoor activity, I decided in this capital of Sarajevo of Bosnia, as our program was getting underway, that I'd take an afternoon hike. So I invited one of my students who happened to also speak the Bosnian language. I did not. And of course was fully fluent in the English language, to hike with me up Trepović Mountain, the biggest mountain overlooking the capital Sarajevo, which many of you have heard of and you remember from the war, how it was devastated. Believe me, it was still devastated. This was only a year and a half after the war ended. So in 1997, with Mimi Kolic, my student, I hiked up. It was a very steep road, paved, but very steep. There are houses left and right, up to the top of Trepović Mountain. And I thought, whoa, that was rigorous, but enervating. It was a nice day. Mimi and I were enjoying chatting about one thing and another. She'd been, of course, to Bosnia before with her capabilities in the Bosnian language. And we saw quite a nice house at the very top of the mountain, 2-story house with a nice yard. And there were 2 people in the front yard waving at us, 2 Bosnian people. We thought, well, that's quite nice. Needless to say, let's say hello. Don't pass up these opportunities. Don't pass up the opportunities to meet folks. So we walked into the yard. They greeted us in the Bosnian language, and luckily my student was able to translate. And it's amazing because this picture that you see here was taken later. The woman we met with her husband was Asia Comber. Her husband was Ekrem Comber. And she was in a wheelchair without 2 legs, without 1 arm, and with 3 fingers on her good arm. We were amazed. Needless to say.
Was her husband the president of Bosnia?
No,
Okay.
her husband was a small scale merchant.
Why do you call her the Queen?
Oh, hey, man.
Okay.
That's where I'm going with this story. Wait for it, man. Oh, it's all good. Yeah, now we know. Really. It's all good, man. Listen, if we can't chuckle, we're not good. I love to chuckle with my good friend Steve. Find out about this queen business. So we chatted, we had a lovely chat, and I said, well, it's so nice to meet you. Would you mind, again, translated by my nice student, Mimi, would you mind telling me what happened? Why you're missing 2 legs and 1 arm and have another arm with 3 fingers on the hand? She said, I'll be glad to tell you. And my husband and I together will be glad to tell you. The Bosnian War, which you'll all recall quite well, was ominous, deadly. Thousands of people died in the early 1990s. And of course, Sarajevo was one of the target areas with various Serbian and non-Serbian forces on site. During the war, and believe me, other Bosnians were not innocent of this, but Serbian forces planted landmines all over the place, including, I'm sad to tell you, in people's yards, at strategic locations, not in everybody's yard. This was, as you just heard me say, at the top of Trebovic Mountain, the largest mountain overlooking Sarajevo, and their house was the tallest spot on the mountain. Therefore, strategically located for forces, including the invading Serbian forces. And at some point, of course, they evacuated, all the people that had evacuated and gone elsewhere down to stay with their relatives and other people downtown, in the lowlands. Nobody wanted to be up in the uplands at this time. During that time, sadly, Serbian forces planted a tank mine in Asia and Ekrem's backyard. Assuming, of course, that some other Bosnian forces would come there and be blown to smithereens. Well, no Bosnian forces had come there and had not been blown to smithereens. The war ended. Nobody knows where these landmines are. Let me tell you, my friends, just more generally, landmines are one of the world's most odious things. There's our anti-landmine conventions, which I support. They don't always work. In some countries, from Mozambique to Bosnia, you still have thousands, even today, of unexploded landmines because people don't know where they are, and no one has yet, fortunately, stepped on them. I'm sorry to say, Asia, in coming back to her home and starting to clean her garden, stepped on the landmine. And it wasn't just a small, well, any landmine is deadly, but it was a tank landmine known as a pumpkin, meaning the large landmine, about yay big, I've looked at these things, about yay big, has a smaller kind of a mine in the middle of it. And so if you activate the small mine, the big mine blows up. So it doesn't take the weight of some truck or tank coming in to blow this up. It only takes the weight of a human stepping on the smaller mine in the circle of the large mine. That's what happened to Asia. She stepped on it, and as Ekrem described it to Mimi and I with our eyes like this, his dear wife was blown, he said, 15 meters into the air, straight up. God. He was right there near her. In a huge cloud of smoke and giant noise, huge sound of the landmine. She came tumbling down, straight down in a torrent of blood. I'm sorry to be gross about this, but this is just the way life is. And you folks are all smart people who care about other people. In a torrent of blood and mud, as the ground was, of course, ripped up, lying there. Ekrem ran over, and unbelievably, she was alive. He had a little Volkswagen Bug, one of those little bug cars. Oh, it was probably 10 years old. He happened to have it parked right near the yard. He grabbed Asia, wrapped her in a blanket, I'm sorry again, I have to be gripping about this, with her limbs partially hanging off, and wrapped her in a blanket and stuck her in the back seat of his bug. The bugs are small, you know, you guys, this isn't a big truck or something. He got her in the back seat, and he madly, as he told me and Mimi, tore down the mountain. It's a paved road, luckily steep, but paved road. The hospital was about 3 miles away from where they lived. I've been to that hospital. I also suffered an injury in Bosnia of a different sort, but that's a different story. And tore down the mountain, got to the hospital. Doctors and nurses were standing on the front step. He said, "Oh, here's my wife. She's been severely damaged and injured. I mean, she's almost dead. Can you help her?" And they said, "Oh, we knew somebody was going to be coming. We heard the mine go off 3 miles away. We were waiting for someone. It's you, and we're ready to help you." She went through, over the course of weeks, multiple surgeries. Her 2 legs were removed. Her damaged arm was removed. They left her other arm on with the 3 fingers, and she survived. Intellectually, totally intact. Isn't that something? Now, did she shared with us, was she traumatized? Of course. Was her husband traumatized? Of course. Did they wrestle with this? They had a family there. Of course. All of that, yes. But they rebounded, and by the time we met them, they were on the rebound. Then, as I bring this to a conclusion, and we'll get to Steve's question about the Queen.
Okay.
She said, "You know, I was waiting to meet Princess Diana of England." We said, "You were?" And we met, I'll see, actually on several occasions. This wasn't just the one time we met her. She said, "Yes, because Princess Diana is an anti-landmine person." You remember that? She was one of the most vocal spokeswomen,
Yes.
spokespersons against landmines. And she traveled from Africa to Europe, also to the United States, to talk about the problem of landmines. Princess Diana was killed in that wreck in France just a couple of weeks before she was going to meet Asiya, because Asiya was the most severely injured woman from the Bosnian War who survived. It's a little bit hard for me to tell some of this because I still get emotional about it, but you'll forgive me for that.
Of course. Great.
I said, "Asiya, I'm so sorry you didn't get to meet Princess Diana." She said, "So am I." But I said, "Asiya, if she would have met you, she would have said, 'You're the queen of this mountain.'"
Good story. Okay, got 3 more to go in about 20 minutes.
Big time.
Just time check.
Here's the next one. Oh, good. You can see this perfectly. This is the prisoner of war camp in World War II in New Mexico. Many of the prisoners were brought to the United States, as you know, as the war was unfolding and as it was coming to a conclusion, including German prisoners. This is called The Last Soldier. One day in 1984, my good friend Gene Wiles, who I'd worked with in the refugee programming area in Colorado, we were working on a number of programs that were of interest to folks, called me and said, "Peter, you've got to come to my house tonight, along with some other friends of mine, because I've got a story to tell you, as does my husband, that you won't believe, and we want to tell you in person." Whoa, I'll be there. So I got there, I sat down next to her fireplace, I sat down next to her husband. Her name's Gene Wiles, his name is Dennis Wiles. She said, "We're gonna tell you something that's going to change our lives, might even change your lives." Well, the 6 of us who were there were, again, whoa, what's coming? And Dennis began to speak. He said, "My real name is Georg Gärtner, and I am Hitler's last soldier in America." We didn't even know what to say. Hitler's last soldier. Remember, this is 1984. This is 40 years after the war. And then he told us his whole story. Because he'd never told anyone else, including his wife, until just the preceding few weeks. And she wanted her friends to know, because it was going to change their lives. She thought for the 20 years they'd been married, that she was married to Dennis Wiles. Her name was Jean Wiles, and that she'd married an American person. Long and short, he was captured near the end of the war, taken to this prisoner of war camp in New Mexico, which you have pictured on the screen, along with many other German prisoners. He was a foot soldier. He'd worked in North Africa. And one thing he assured us was this. He said, I never killed anybody. He says, I was a Nazi soldier. I just want you to know I never killed anybody. We said, good to know. Because it was strange enough as it was. So then he told us how his life had unfolded. He got to the prisoner of war camp. He was there for a while, and he found out a way to escape. There was a train running through that part of southern New Mexico. And since the camp was only modestly guarded, the war was now over. He managed to escape one night and hitch a ride on a train. And he headed toward California. Now, at this point in time, he was learning English. He's a very smart man and learning English, but still spoke English with a very heavy German accent. His idea was to go underground and live and become an American citizen somehow, with false paperwork and everything else. And he did some research and somehow found the name. Maybe it was a person who was deceased or whatever, as some people do with IDs, and found the name Dennis Wiles, co-opted the name Dennis Wiles, and started working in warehouses and other things in California, and he worked elsewhere too. I'm just sort of summarizing this part. And he told us, I was always very careful to only speak a little bit of English, obviously as best I could, without a German accent. So he spoke simple English, not complicated English, not philosophy, because he couldn't do that without a German accent. You know something about accents because you're an expert, to your credit.
And they tell me every time, even my daughter, people say, where you come from? Oh, what do you mean? I'm here in the States
Yes,
over
but
longer than other
you know what I
people."
mean? Yes, but accents are important and we value accents. But he didn't value it because he didn't want to be discovered. We value it in our other friends, of course, because we love people from all sorts of cultures. So
Rosalinda's from Germany, if any.
exactly right. That's why I'm mentioning.
Yeah, all these stories he is telling. I was there.
You know,
I
yeah.
was born in 39.
I know you are. Yeah, isn't that amazing? So here you have this guy. So anyway, he led his life. He's got better and better at English. He had some jobs. He used fake papers. Eventually, over some years, met Jean Wiles, the wife who became Jean Wiles, his wife. And then at some point and oh, by the way, people knew that he'd escaped. He was on several wanted posters during the late 1940s and early 1950s. He was on some wanted posters. This man escaped. Where is he? Nobody knew. Under the name, of course, Georg Gittner. So anyway, nobody found him. Nobody found him, and they looked for him. He was very clever. And he worked at legitimate jobs and earned a pretty good income, in fact. So he met Jean, married Jean, and never told her a thing about this until about 2 weeks before he decided to spill the beans to his dear wife of many years and to his wife's friends, including me. And so he did spill the beans, told us everything. And he said, I'm going to go visit Germany now that I've told you. And when I get there, I'm going to use the name Georg Gittner. Gittner. I'm going to use that name. I'm not going to use the name Dennis Wiles. And so we went on. I'm sorry to tell you, shortly thereafter, they divorced because of the tensions around all of this. And he lived his life on, as did Jean. They're both deceased now. Lived his life on. And he spent his last years back in Colorado. I believe it was either Loveland or Longmont. And I saw a picture of him online when he was about 90. years old. Hitler's last soldier in America.
Did you ever ask him why he decided to reveal his true identity?
We did ask him, and he just said it was time, and he felt it was also fair to his wife. Well, okay, yeah, she didn't know until he told her. That's why he wanted to be fair to his wife. But then not long after they divorced because of the tension around the whole thing.
Quite a secret to keep from your spouse.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to the next photo.
Okay, he's up.
Yeah, please.
Did they have kids?
They did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it was less complicated.
Well, here's the next one I'd like to share with you good folks, and we're right on time because then after these next couple, we'll have some chance for you to share some memorable people that you met, reflecting back on what Reverend Amy said the other day. The oldest man. The oldest man. I took this photo in 1980. So we had a little bit of fun with Indonesian earlier. I'm going to give you some more fun with Indonesian now because this is in Indonesia on the huge island of Sumatra. You might recall Sumatra is the largest western island in Indonesia. Then you get Java, then you get Bali, then you get all the way out to the east where the Sherpa was at the extreme other end, which is New Guinea, Indonesian. So here we are in Western Indonesia, in Sumatra, working on a water resource project. Many of my projects overseas have had to do with water resources, community development, and human rights work. So we were assessing some water resources. And one day, our driver, a very nice young man named Rashid, said to me in Indonesian, "Apakah Anda mau bertemu selaki-laki di dalam hutan ini yang lebih tua di dunia?" What I just said to you was, would you like to meet a man who lives in the jungle who's the oldest man in the world? Now, you could either say yes or no. If you're an anthropologist, you better say yes, whether this is mythological or not. Right? So I said, Baik sekali. Yes, indeed. Very good. I do want to meet the oldest man in the world. So Rashid said, well, Tita Jau, it's not far. When everybody in Indonesia ever says it's not far, it means it's really far. The Kathy, of course, Kathy speaks some Indonesian too. And the other one Kathy and I laugh at is when anybody says sudah, which means already, like I already understand it. I've already been there. I've already known you. Whenever they say sudah, what they really mean is balloon, meaning not yet. The opposite. So we laugh about sudah and balloon, and we laughed about dekat, which means near, and Jau, which means far. In fact, it was very far. Jau Zakali, very far. So he said, I'll take you there. We have a Land Rover that we can use on a Saturday when we're not working otherwise. And so we trundle on these mud roads into the south central part of Sumatra, about 2 hours. Then he said, oh, it's still not far. Well, we've been driving for 2 hours.
Are we there yet?
Yeah, are we there yet? Well stated. And he said, well, we'll just walk the last way, which was, of course, another half hour in the mud. Di dalam lumpur itu, that means in the mud. And finally, we arrived at a little umbul. A little umbul is a little micro village of about 5 huts. And they said, we're here. And now we're going to introduce you to the oldest man. I was, wow, I think it's worth it to make it this far. So again, speaking in Indonesian, all of this takes place. I'll translate for you the rest of it. I introduced myself politely to the man. And then my colleague said, oh, by the way, we also want you to meet his wife. She's much younger. She's only 105. Wow. Impressive. So long and short, he wasn't 115 and she wasn't 105. But in this area where they don't have written records, at least not in these small remote villages at that time, this is now the 1980s, they value elderly people, just as we in our class here value elderly people greatly. They do too, I can tell you. They sure do. And as a part of that, they do what's known in anthropology as systematic age exaggeration. Meaning, as that valued elder gets older, they add a few more years to the estimate of how old he or she is. And that's what they done to this very nice gentleman and his younger wife. How did I figure this out? By using a system of age and calendric estimation. Because these people aren't lying to me, they're telling me what they think. We value what people think. So I asked them about different volcanic eruptions, which are prominent in those areas, you know, and you know it, Bob knows it. And I asked them about the famous eruption of Krakatau. You guys know that one, the most famous in Indonesia, which wasn't too far from where these people were living. And it occurred in 1883. If this man, when I met in 1984, was 115, he would have been a teenager, right at the height of his acuity and knowledge of what was happening with the world's, at that time, the world's greatest volcanic explosion. Everybody there knew about it at that time.
Halfway around the world, right?
Yeah. Well,
They heard it halfway around the world.
well, not the effects were heard halfway around the world, not the sound. The sound was heard about 2,000 miles, but the ash and all around the world, the ash and other secondary things around the world. So he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what Krakatoa is. I've never heard of it. Okay. Because he was perfectly articulate. I mean, he was very sharp. Then I asked him about a couple of other events known to Indonesians in that area and from early days, and he didn't know about them. So then I asked further, when did you get married? And he said, oh, how many years ago it was? 50 years ago or so. And do you have children? Yes, there's a couple of our children. They're maybe 40 years old and whatnot and another. Long and short, I estimated that he was 85 and his wife was 80. Isn't that something? Because in no way, after I figured this out, approximately, did I demean them or say, oh, you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about? Or all the villagers who were there who revere these people as the oldest? Yeah. I simply said, thank you. It's been wonderful to meet you. I slogged back through the mud, got back in that car. The driver, by the way, is the same guy who told me after he had his 13th child, he and his wife, that he was thinking about joining family planning.
Thinking about
That's a
it.
bonus dividend to this story. I like that one.
That's good.
So here's the last one we're going to have, and we're right on time. So we'll end with something again with some humor to it. This is called the rummy. And there's the rummy right there, that man in the shirt. He's dancing at a dance I was invited to. I took his photo. So I was working in Guyana, a small nation, as you might know, on the north coast of South America. Used to be British Guyana. By the time I was there, it was independent Guyana. I was working again on a water assessment project. And I was staying at an old plantation house, which was converted to a house for expatriates and other researchers coming in. I was a socioeconomic and anthropological researcher for the water project that we were assessing. And we stayed in this very nice old plantation house near the river, near the north coast. And it turns out, very interestingly, in Guyana, this is fascinating to an anthropologist, probably to you good folks too, there are three kinds of Indian. Get this. There are West Indian Indians, basically black people from the West Indies who now live in Guyana. There are Native American Indians. Yes. And there are Indians from India. This is the only place that I know of in the world where there are three named groups, entirely different ethnically, that use the same word. Now, isn't that something? They're all Indians. Well, the Indians from India and the Indians from the West Caribbean who were there invited me to this dance. Now, Kathy will tell you, I'm the world's worst dancer. And Kathy is the world's best dancer. So the background to this is, and it's in the book, I've only ever been punched in the face twice in my life. Both had to do with dances. That's why I wanted to end on a fun story for you. The first time was when I was dating Kathy at the University of Colorado. And I was to work with the setup man for this little band. Unbelievably, the name of the band was Harry Snowshoes and the Cupcakes. In any event, the setup man was a gnarly guy who was gruff and mean-spirited, about my age, about 20 or so. And he didn't like the fact that I was saying this and that about the setup prior to the band getting started and the dance beginning. And I said something that apparently offended him. He just leaned over and punched me right in the face. Well, since I'm a courteous person, I did not punch him back. Kathy knows all this whole story. Kathy was there, supporting me as she always did prior to marriage and after marriage. So, in any event, the dance went on. Harry Snowshoes, who, by the way, I talked to, and I said, it's nice to meet you. I just met your setup man. He was a bum. But is your real name Harry Snowshoes? He said, no. So anyway, then now we're going to move back to Guyana. The second time I was punched in the face. So I was invited to this dance by these various Indian named people. I was the only white person there, and they were welcoming me and very glad to have me as a guest researcher on the project. But for some reason, this guy who had been drinking rum heavily. Rum is a big deal down there, my friends, with sugarcane and all. Believe me, I was a leading producer at that time, particularly of sugarcane rum. This guy, for some reason, just decided he didn't like me. So I was dancing, not very well, with one of the ladies who, invited me to the dance. He just came over and punched me right in the face. Whoa. And I didn't punch him back, you'll be glad to know. So, isn't that something? The only 2 times I've ever been punched had something to do with dancing. Might tell you also that you can see why I didn't go on to become a good dancer. Discouraged about dancing. Final point of this story, and then we're going to open it to a couple of your comments of who you met at the memorial, is that I was there only 3 years after the Jonestown massacre.
Yes.
Jim Jones, you all remember, the ominous cult leader of the People's Temple, where over 900 people died by committing suicide under his hand, under his directions. I was there only 3 years after, and one of the nice young people who helped me at the plantation, he's like one of the co-managers at the place where we were staying for our water resource assessment. He told me, he said, the Jonestown people tried to recruit me as a Guyanese person, and I told him no. Good thing he told him no. He survived. The final little fun story about this one is the same man, his name was Patrick, said to me one day, oh, Dr. Peter, you've got to move out of your bedroom. I said, why? He said, the president's coming. I said, the president of the company? No, the president of Guyana. Whenever he comes to this part of the country, he stays in this house and he stays in your bedroom. I said, he does? Yeah, that's his favorite bedroom. You're sleeping in the president's bed. So I said, like George Washington, did the president say Peter Van Arsdale slept here? Thank you, folks.
Very good. Very good. Wow. Go right ahead. Let's pass the microphone forward, please, Mary. Thank you. Dr. Bob, go ahead.
So one of the people I met only by radio was the man who mixed the Kool-Aid. He actually was sent to med school by James Jones. And he contacted me for a consultation, which I gave. And then unfortunately, I heard that his practices were rather unethical. Anyway,
You have that connection. That's amazing.
Wow.
it
It's
is.
amazing historically.
It came through, guys that have radio, what do you call them?
Ham
Ham radios.
Ham
Yeah,
radio guy, yeah.
My dad.
amazing.
This morning I met an anatomist from the University of Iowa at church who had been an anatomist in the med school for 38 years and knew a lot of my heroes there. There it is.
Memorable
I turned
content.
around,
Yep.
there he was behind. Yeah, Paul was.
Memorable context that we have.
Yeah, there it is.
Thanks, Bob.
Every angle.
Every angle. What other fun, memorable context do people want to share that they've had?
How about friends in low places? No, I don't mean. I'll tell. Frank asked if he sold Kool-Aid. Did he serve the Kool-Aid?
Actually,
We drink it.
actually, Frank, it was Flavor Aid.
He died.
Flavor Aid.
It was Flavor Aid, not Kool-Aid. It was Flavor Aid. Yeah.
Flavor Aid.
Yep, it was Flavor Aid.
Okay,
And yeah, Jim Jones also died.
Yeah,
we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to tell a quick story and then I'll get to you, Gene. Quick story on my wife. Where whenever we travel, she looks for interesting people and she says, "What is your story?" So we were on a schooner ship in Maine a couple years ago. And there was an older lady and she said, "What is your story?" And so the lady told her life story. And the lady turned out to be the widow of Dr. Spock, who wrote the children's book in the 50s and 60s. And so it was just another interesting person.
And that interesting encounter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, gonna go to Gene. Before we get away, we've got about 5 minutes left. We want to know what makes people memorable. Want to ask Peter that.
Yeah.
And what elements.
Hear from Gene.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Gene, go ahead.
The voice of God. This is a commercial to plug the messaging that St. Andrews is going through as far as streaming and stuff. I'm gonna go back before television,
Close.
late 40s, 1940s. Before television, that's not the iPhone, it's the television.
Yep.
Ralph W. Sutton, the preacher of the National Radio Pulpit, Joplin, Missouri. I say it with the right accent, Missouri. My dad was at the wheel. He was with the Danforth Foundation, and the Danforth Foundation founded a religious emphasis week throughout the country. United National Radio Pulpit. When that spoke, liberal Protestant Christianity was speaking on Main Street. It was considered so Main Street denomination. Ralph W. Sutton was the voice of God to me because as a child, that was what I listened to. This is before television now. And it was the voice of God. And I just wanted to, and this happened at universities throughout America because the Danforth Foundation, Farina Ralston, the checkerboard squares, don't you remember that? So anyway, financed this. But Sockman was coming to Pittsburgh State College, it was KSTC at that time, to speak. And I thought I was the voice, was with the voice of God. That shows you the power of messaging and what we're doing here at St. Andrews, as far as to project the voice of St. Andrews beyond Islands Range.
Thank you.
I have one, Steve.
Miss Linda,
Am I?
go ahead.
Yeah, this is a relative. My cousin, who was from an older sister, so he's quite a few years older. In fact, he's 102. He is one of the sole surviving World War II hump pilots, and his stories of flying from Burma into China are totally amazing. His family did have him write a short book about it, but just to hear him, even at 102, tell the stories. He has donated to, I believe, the Air Force Museum in Ohio, all of his memorabilia, including a number of trips to China on the Hessens to be honored as a hump pilot by the Chinese. So at 102, he's still telling the stories.
Great story. Thank you, Linda.
That was just covered last night on the Tom Hanks World War II series.
Oh, very good.
Well, Steve's asked me to conclude with just a couple points because we're right on time for what I think makes things and people memorable. You've gotten some examples that I've shared with you today, and thank you for being such good friends and such good listeners and such good interlocutors as you talk back and forth. I greatly appreciate that, because I think much of what makes people memorable is something unusual. People I've shared with you all had something unusual, but they don't have to be unusual to be memorable, but they often are. Most of the 50 in my book did have something unusual about them, which is why I chose them. I've met more than 50 people, believe me, in my career, way more. But I chose 50 who had something unusual about them. So I think that's one thing that makes them memorable, Steve. Second thing, to me, making memorable is if the person will chat with you, share with you, all the people, even the rummy. I mean, I talked to the guy, after he hit me, but I talked to him. You have to engage with people and talk to them back and forth. That makes them memorable. And then the third thing for me is what perceived role do they have? And as you notice, I assigned each of these people, as I do all 50 in the book, a role. The Sherpa, the oldest man, the last soldier. These are roles. So can you identify a role in that context for that person?
Okay, final question. Why do you think Jesus was so memorable in history? In 1 minute.
2 hours.
Well, for crying out loud, I mean, that's a tough question.
It
Well,
was unusual. He had
It is unusual,
a different message for his
He had-
time
and he interacted with people. He listened. He didn't just talk. He listened. He was out there in the community. Almost, I could even say it this way, almost like an anthropologist, meaning being out there, a sociologist, anthropologist, psychologist, out there interacting with people and listening to what they needed.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, apart from his Christian the vitality of what became Christianity, to me, those were some of the things that I like so much about him as a human. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Oh, by the way, if anybody needs a flyer for my book, and got one, if anybody's interested in getting the